Moving along, guys. You can see we're not moving away from the letter I anytime soon, but this is it. 6-8, complex numbers, day 2. You guys should be getting real comfortable with the letter I. Now, these are going to be a little more difficult, though. Just a little more work. So, I'm going to save the best for last, and that's example 1. So, move on to example 2. Bottom line, you got to ask yourself the question, do you remember the lesson about conjugates? See, and if the answer is yes, then you are well on your way to having this not be as much work as you think, because you can just fool. And notice, this is the same as this. This is the same as this. Here's a plus, here's a minus. That makes them conjugates, which means we can fool, which means our lives are much easier. So we got to go square root of 2, square root of 2. So I'll show my work. There's the F. And when you square root, the roots fly off. And now, ooh. Well, that just means, and this gets messy, so be careful. I just have to multiply this by this. Don't forget this negative, and no, these two negatives do not cancel. We've talked about that a lot. So I got to take the negative square root of negative 5 and multiply it by a positive square root of a negative 5. Well, that's a mouthful. First of all, I'm going to take care of these, because when you square a square root, what happens to the roofs? The roofs fly off. And then I got the negative in front, making it a positive 5. 2 plus 5 is 7. Yes, you can FOIL it all out, but the O and the I 100% are going to cancel, so it's a waste of time. All right, so example 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 are pretty identical. And I think you'll get the idea after a couple, so I don't even know if I'm going to do all of these. So first of all, I'm not worried about this. So that's not where my concentration is. My concentration's down here. I've got a radical in the basement. Do you guys remember problems like this, where you had a problem in the denominator, so you'd multiply it by the conjugate? Well, that's what we're going to do again, okay? So don't worry about this. Let's move up here. We're going to multiply by the conjugate. But if we multiply the bottom by the conjugate, we got to multiply the top by the same thing. Because remember, whatever we multiply this by must equal 1. So this is divided by itself, so it's 1. So we're not changing the value of the original. We're just changing what it looks like. So because these are conjugates in the denominator, we can fool. See, that's the easy part. So 2 times 2 is 4. This gives us negative, so the OOL gives us negative 9i squared, which is the same thing as negative 9 times negative 1, so it's 4 plus 9, which is 13. Now that's supposed to be the easy part. But in the top, we got, sorry about that, we got to FOIL it. Why? Because these are not conjugates. So I'm going to take advantage of this nice space over here. And so I got 5 minus I, and then I got 2 minus 3i. Here we go. 10 minus 2i minus 15i. 3i squared. All right. So I'm going to go here first, because that's negative 17i. Now remember, I squared is negative 1. I shouldn't have written it in that box. So that'd be negative 3. That'd be 3 times negative 1. So 10 and a negative 3 is 7. But I got to put it all over 13. Remember what I said earlier. If they don't reduce this way or this way, just leave it alone. So we're done. Okay? Now, like I said, I'm going to get you started on example 4, but I'm not going to finish it. You would just multiply by the conjugate, but then you'd have to multiply the top one by the same thing. In the top, you'd have to FOIL it. In the bottom, you fool, and then you reduce. Same thing with example 5. Same thing with example 6. So let's go ahead and tackle this one, and we'll finish this one. 3 minus I got to multiply by 3 plus I. So in the top, bing, bing, we get 6 plus 2I. In the bottom, we can just, 3 times 3 is 9. Negative I times positive I is negative I squared, which remember, I squared is a negative 1. So this is like a negative 1. A little confusing, but 9 plus 1 is 10. And like I said up here, remember, if this and this and this all have a number that can go into it, you should keep going. Look, we got a 2, a 6, a 10. All of those are divisible by 2, so we're going to. And this would be considered the most simplified answer. Okay? Now I'm going to do one of these two. Anybody want to pick one? Pick one? Pick one? Okay, I agree with you. Number 6. So I do not want to concentrate on the numerator. If I do, I'm going to start thinking about like canceling these and canceling these. And that you can't do that. The only time you could do that is if it was written like this. And a lot of students take the bait and they start canceling. See, this is okay to cancel these 6s because they're connected by multiplication. This is not okay. Now, I'm just going to keep it short and sweet and just tell you that. But I'm going to concentrate on the bottom. And I'm going to multiply by the conjugate. But if I multiply that by the conjugate, I got to multiply that by the conjugate. Where's the work going to come? The top. Because we have to FOIL that out. So I like the good old FOIL box. So here it comes. I'm doing the top first. So 6 minus I squared root of 2. And then the same thing here. 6 minus I squared root of 2. This times this is 36. This times this is negative 6I squared root of 2. This times this, negative 6I squared root of 2. Uh-oh. Put your answer over here, and then when you simplify it, put it in here. So negative times a negative is positive. I times I is I squared, which is a negative 1. Square root of 2 times the square root of 2 is just 2. What does this all make when I multiply it all together? Negative 2. So I'm going to go 36 minus 2 is 34. I'm going to add that crazy looking stuff together. Negative 12I square root of 2 all over. Now we got to go down here and 6 times 6, 36. Positive times a negative is negative. I times I is I squared, which is another negative 1. Square root of 2 is 2. Isn't this just the same thing as 36 plus 2? Yep. So 36 plus 2 is 38, and that's what's going to go in the bottom. And notice, a 2 will come out of there, a 2 will come out of there, a 2 will come out of there, so I need to do that. So 17 minus 6I square root of 2 all over 19. And there's my final answer. So I'm not being lazy, I promise, by not doing example 4 and not doing example 7. But you can see that this is kind of overkill. You do the same thing for every problem. So I'll get you kick-started on this one. So this is what drives the machine. I got to look at this and say, hey, what's its conjugate? And the only thing it's going to change is this. So I get negative 1 minus 2i. And then I got to do the same thing here. Negative 1 minus 2i. And so what do we do in the bottom? What do we do in the top? FOIL, and then simplify. I think you should be good to go. Attack. Oh, wait a minute. I remember I said save the best for last. Okay, almost forgot. So, I'm going to show you a little math trickery. Now, if I'm in your shoes, I'm not going to see this trick. But I've seen this problem, and that's why it's example 1. This shot probably should have been saved for last because it is tricky. However, what's 2 times 3 times 4? Anyone? 6 times 4 is 24. What if I rearrange this and I went 2 times 4 times 3? Well, look at 8 times 3 is 24. So in multiplication, you can rearrange stuff. When would you ever want to? Right now. Do you remember the rule that if you have conjugates, you can but if you don't, you have to FOIL. Which one's a lot less work? Here. Notice, if I just use my noggin and I go, wait a minute, ignore this 2, but remember this rule, I'm going to rewrite this problem as 3 plus 2i times 3 minus 2i, but then it happens again, 3 plus 2i, 3 minus 2i. Now, why is this a nice little shortcut? Well, first of all, this is the same thing as this. So I only need to do one of them and then take the answer and just assume that it's equal because it's going to be. But then notice now I have a conjugate times a conjugate, so I can fool. So 3 times 3 is 9. Positive times a negative is negative. And then 2 times 2 is 4. I times I is I squared, which is a negative 1, which is 9 plus 4, which is 13. So this right here is equal to 13. So guess what this is equal to? 13. So I got to go 13 times 13, which is 13 squared, which is 169. Now a different student might take forever and actually square this using FOIL, square this using FOIL, and then you got to multiply that answer by that answer, and it's going to take you at least 3 times as long. You'll get the same answer, but my goodness, this one is hoping that you see the little math trickery. There you go. Glad I didn't forget that one.